There are moments when silence feels heavier than noise, when even surrounded by people, the soul whispers that something essential is missing. This absence is not about company, but about connection, the invisible thread that ties the human heart to the vastness of existence. What if the universe has been speaking to you all along, not through grand miracles, but through subtle alignments, ordinary events carrying extraordinary meaning? The real question is, are you listening, or are you drowning in the static of your own mind? The journey you're about to take is not about chasing mystical fireworks or waiting for supernatural proof. It is about cultivating the art of perception, learning to notice what already pulses beneath the surface of your daily life. Neuroscience shows us that the brain filters reality according to where attention rests. Spiritually, traditions remind us that intention is a compass. When attention and intention converge in a stable inner state, the world seems to mirror back opportunities, lessons, and confirmations that were invisible before. This is not coincidence. It is the alignment between your inner field and the flow of life. In this space, you will discover how to translate signals into guidance, not superstition. You will practice small rituals of awareness, short moments of stillness, and the discipline of writing down patterns that repeat. More importantly, you will learn how to embody the emotional state of what you long for, so that the signals you perceive are not random echoes of fear, but resonances of clarity. This introduction is an invitation to shift from loneliness to dialogue, from confusion to coherence. The universe does not speak in human words. It speaks in the rhythm of synchronicities and in the calm expansion of your body when truth is near. From this point on, your task is simple yet demanding. Listen differently, and life itself will respond. There is a hidden restlessness that most people carry in silence. It appears in the pause between two breaths, in the weight of mornings that repeat without purpose, in the background noise of a mind that runs but does not arrive. What many call disconnection from the universe is, in truth, overexposure to their own noise. The mind has become crowded with endless loops of anticipation, regret, and comparison, leaving little space for the subtle currents of guidance that always flow. To see the signs that life is placing along the way, one must first quiet the inner turbulence that masks them. Science helps us understand why this happens. The human brain is not designed to record everything. It filters. The insular and anterior cingulate cortex, often referred to as the salience network, decide what deserves attention. If this network is trained by urgency, everything is filtered as threat. A text left unanswered feels like abandonment. A delay at work feels like failure. A change of plan feels like chaos. In such a state, even the most luminous sign of direction is mistaken for danger. But when the same network is educated through presence, its filter shifts. Suddenly, what stands out are not threats but opportunities. A coincidence stops being an accident and starts feeling like a compass. This is where the first paradox of connection arises. The path is not about demanding louder messages from the universe. It is about reducing the interference that keeps you deaf to the whispers already present. Imagine standing at a busy intersection, car horns, voices, music, all layered into chaos. Now, imagine someone trying to speak to you from across the street. You do not need them to shout louder. You need the traffic to pause. In the same way, signals are already flowing through your daily life. They do not need amplification. They need silence. The first challenge, then, is not lack of signs, but the addiction to noise. Anxiety often disguises itself as control. The brain rehearses catastrophic scenarios, believing that prediction equals safety. Yet all it produces is exhaustion, a constant rehearsal of futures that rarely arrive. Another trap is the dissonance between desire and behavior. A person may claim to long for peace, yet fill their days with stimulants, news feeds, and arguments that fuel agitation. There is also the subtle temptation of performative spirituality, rituals that look impressive but do not alter decisions. The body continues to live as before, even though the words pretend otherwise. Each of these patterns feeds a cycle of empty anticipation, a dopamine rush that never delivers. The search becomes the habit, while integration is postponed indefinitely. It is in this terrain that a counterintuitive truth becomes vital. During turbulence, silence is more productive than intensifying intention. Modern culture praises effort, repetition, and volume. Affirm more, Visualize more, ask louder. Yet attention works differently. What recalibrates perception is not more insistence, but the reset of hierarchy. A simple breathing practice, inhaling to the count of 4, exhaling to the count of 6, practiced for 3 minutes, shifts the physiology of the body into coherence. Heart rate variability increases, signaling to the nervous system that safety is present. Safety creates nuance, and nuance creates perception. In that space, you notice the conversation on the bus that echoes your private dilemma, the email that arrives precisely when you considered giving up, the delay that kept you from a toxic encounter. None of these are supernatural tricks. They are probabilities revealed by a trained filter. To make this process practical, discipline is necessary. A first tool is the 3-column signal journal. Event, inner state at the time, small action inspired. This is not about poetry or mystical interpretation, but about facts. Over time, as the brain records these patterns, it begins to predict where attention is worth investing. What felt random becomes structured. Another method is a 2-minute anchoring audio. During a breathing sequence, you ask, "What in me needs adjustment now?" Notice, not "What does the universe want?" but "What in me requires reorganization to hear better?" The difference is profound. It shifts the responsibility from external authority to inner alignment. Finally, once a week, build a map of synchronicities. Track names, numbers, or themes that repeat. Instead of asking, "What is fate trying to say?" ask, "What decision am I postponing?" In many cases, signals insist because avoidance is active. Think of attention as a photographic filter. If the lens is tinted red, even snow looks like fire. Changing the filter does not alter the world. It alters what stands out. In the same way, signs are not miracles violating natural law. They are alignments emerging once distortion is reduced. The goal is not to see the invisible, but to reduce the static so that the obvious can finally appear. A relationship that always leaves your shoulders tight, a task that consistently locks your jaw, a conversation that drains your chest. These bodily contractions are arrows pointing at what requires renegotiation. Conversely, genuine signals are accompanied by expansion, by calm openness, not by hysterical excitement. A person who commits to a week of journaling often discovers that the body has been delivering messages all along. Shoulders stiffen every time a certain name appears on the phone. The breath shortens when an overdue project is mentioned. These are not random physiological quirks. They are the body's underlined footnotes insisting that attention is due. By learning to treat them as part of the system of signs, you stop waiting for dramatic coincidences and start realizing that guidance has always been embodied. To anchor this, here is a structured 10-minute practice. Spend 3 minutes in coherent breathing, 4 minutes writing down 3 recent coincidences, 2 minutes identifying the smallest action that responds to them, and 1 minute committing to act within 24 hours. This is the way silence becomes conversation. The universe does not shout over the noise. It synchronizes with the rhythm you allow. Consider the effect of one person applying this faithfully for a month. What once felt like a hostile silence begins to reveal subtle dialogue. The delay at work becomes a moment to meet someone essential. The repeated mention of a theme across unrelated conversations ceases to be ignored. Small steps accumulate into trust. Solitude no longer feels like abandonment, because life itself has become a partner in dialogue. There is a deep misunderstanding that persists in the world of manifestation and spiritual practice. The belief that visualization alone is enough, that imagining a perfect future with intensity is the key to bringing it into form. Yet what often happens is that people confuse visualization with projection. One is the rehearsal of the body inhabiting a completed reality. The other is the anxious attempt to negotiate with the future in order to calm fear. This subtle distinction changes everything. Projection fuels restlessness. Visualization, when coherent, stabilizes energy. In the first, the body learns to crave endlessly. In the second, it learns to inhabit trust. Modern neuroscience gives us a map for why this difference matters. When the body is immersed in anxious projection, dopamine surges in pursuit of novelty, keeping the brain restless and scanning for proof that never arrives. The more you seek confirmation, the less you feel grounded. In contrast, when visualization is paired with coherence of breath and presence, serotonin and acetylcholine rise, calming the nervous system and preparing the brain for learning and focus. In this physiological space, you are not begging the universe for answers. You are creating the conditions to perceive what has been aligned for you all along. The signal is not a prize given for intense wishing. It is feedback, a mirror of the coherence between desire, state, and aligned action. This coherence is not abstract. It can be measured in the rhythm of the body. Coherent breathing, 4 counts in, 6 counts out, or 5 counts balanced, signals safety to the brainstem. Safety frees the prefrontal cortex, the seat of meaning and decision-making, to take priority. Without it, the limbic system hijacks interpretation, and every flicker in the environment becomes superstition. In such a state, you may mistake noise for guidance, chasing every coincidence out of desperation. But with coherence, the unnecessary static fades, and patterns reveal themselves with clarity. You begin to notice not every random flicker, but the repetitions that hold weight. Here lies a surprising truth. Doing less but with precision generates more authentic synchronicity. The human brain loves thematic focus. When you set a weekly theme for your awareness, such as difficult conversations, opportunities for collaboration, or adjustments in health, your reticular activating system highlights stimuli that connect with that theme. Suddenly, the world appears to respond. It is not magic. It is alignment between your inner theme and the external field. Without this focus, energy scatters in all directions, and you drown in noise. With it, the current of life seems to converge, offering what you are ready to notice. To bring this into practice, consider a 3-step method: attention, intention, and state. Attention begins with a short coherence exercise, 3 minutes of breathing and scanning the body from feet to head. The task is not to eliminate tension, but to soften it slightly, to reclaim even 10% of relaxation. Intention follows, not in the form of vague demands like "show me a sign," but as a precise operational question. What is the next measurable step in this area of my life? Finally, state is cultivated by sustaining, for just 2 minutes, the emotional texture of the desired outcome. Not the mental picture, not the fantasy scene, but the sensation of what it would feel like if the outcome were real, perhaps quiet relief, or the courage of stability, or the gentle rhythm of joy. This emotional marker becomes the resonance by which true signals are recognized later. Imagine someone who longs to change careers. In projection, they would obsessively imagine titles, salaries, or recognition, feeding anxiety. In coherent visualization, they practice AIE with a weekly theme of career. Over the days, they notice repeated conversations, a colleague mentioning teaching, a post about opportunities, an unexpected invitation. The signal is not the loudest or the most dramatic. It is the one that repeats independently, appearing across contexts where the person was not actively searching. This independence is crucial. Forced hunting creates confirmation bias. Sustained state creates convergence. It is important to expose the myths that distort the practice of manifestation. One myth is that collecting rituals substitutes for making choices. A person may meditate, write affirmations, and listen to frequencies, but if decisions remain unchanged, the body learns that magic replaces responsibility. Another myth is the outsourcing of meaning. Every number plate, every sound in the street, every bird becomes an oracle, until the world is suffocated by projection. This is not guidance, it is dependency. A third is the romanticizing of suffering as proof of spiritual depth. If every difficulty is rebranded as a sacred test, then pain becomes identity, and transformation is blocked. A real story brings clarity. A woman in the healthcare field began noticing repeated references to teaching, first in a casual conversation, then in a training session, then in an unexpected phone call. Rather than wait for a grand cosmic sign, she applied the 3-step practice. She breathed into coherence, formulated the question, what is the smallest professional step to test this possibility? She sustained the state of curiosity, not pressure. Within 48 hours, she wrote an email offering to teach a pilot class. The result was immediate, an invitation accepted. The sign did not descend as miracle. It emerged naturally from the intersection of attention, intention, and state. This process can be organized into a weekly rhythm. On 3 days of the week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Practice a short 7-minute version of AIE before the day begins. On 2 other days, Tuesday and Thursday, take 5 minutes at night to review signals, writing down repetitions or convergences. On Sunday, choose the theme for the next week, focusing on only one area. Simplicity builds power. Each theme becomes a lens through which the world is filtered, and the discipline of repetition teaches the nervous system to recognize coherence. When practiced consistently, this method transforms superstition into engineering of the state. The body no longer waits for mystical fireworks, but develops a refined sensitivity to alignment. Synchronicity is not granted as a prize to the worthy. It is a natural outcome of coherence between attention, intention, and state. The universe is not testing you with riddles. It is mirroring the quality of your presence. And when your presence becomes consistent, the signs no longer feel elusive. They become companions, guiding you step by step toward a life where loneliness is replaced by dialogue and where coincidence is revealed as connection. There is a subtle addiction that rarely gets recognized, the addiction to intensity. Many seekers believe that the louder they declare their desires, the stronger they visualize, or the more fervently they repeat affirmations, the closer they will be to answers. Yet intensity is not the same as effectiveness. The human brain, in its default state, engages in what scientists call the default mode network, the web of regions that create the inner narrative of self. In balance, this network provides continuity. It links past, present, and future into a coherent sense of I. But in overdrive, it becomes a trap. It fuels rumination, loops of thought that reinforce fear, regret, or longing. When you mistake intensity for clarity, the default mode network spins faster, and every whisper of intuition is drowned in internal commentary. This is why silence becomes more valuable than insistence. Silence is not resignation, it is architecture. When you stop pushing for an answer, you allow the nervous system to downshift. Attention networks that manage external focus, the parietal and prefrontal systems, come forward, while the inner noise recedes. In this shift, the texture of reality changes. A signal is no longer something you invent out of desperation, but something you notice because you finally made space for it. The universe, as many traditions insist, is never mute. It is we who create the static that makes its voice indistinguishable. To practice this kind of silence is not to abandon desire, but to cultivate trust in the architecture you have already built. Once you have clarified your intention and taken your first steps, the task is not to repeat louder, but to let the environment speak back. Friction is not failure, it is feedback. The delayed meeting, the conversation that surprises, the obstacle that slows you down. Each of these is a thread woven into the dialogue between inner state and external reality. If every obstacle feels like cosmic rejection, you remain enslaved to the fantasy of control. But if you allow them to reveal nuance, you begin to see which paths support your chosen state and which erode it. Practical tools make this silence tangible. One of them is the stop, scan, name method. Pause for a single minute, then scan your body slowly for 2 minutes, noticing where tension resides. Finally, name one emotion you are carrying. The act of naming does not solve it, but it calms the amygdala, handing control back to the prefrontal cortex. Another tool is the 3 doors question. When confronted with a situation, ask yourself if it requires action, observation, or postponement. Forcing action where observation is enough creates unnecessary noise. Equally, postponing when action is ready leads to stagnation. A third practice is mapping the ecology of desire. Write down how your chosen goal impacts 3 systems: the body, your relationships, and your work. Authentic signals support the ecology. False signals corrode one or more of these spheres. To embody this, imagine the gardener. He prepares the soil, waters faithfully, and plants carefully. His role is not to demand that the seeds sprout faster, but to observe the behavior of the water and the soil. Where does the water sink in easily? Where does it run off? Where does it pool into mud? These are signs of the terrain, not punishments or rewards. In the same way, when you step back from intensity and observe the way your desires interact with the environment, you learn which paths sustain life and which create imbalance. Silence also protects against common distortions of meaning. One of these is what could be called spiritual overfitting, bending every single event to confirm your theory. If you decide that every random occurrence must validate your vision, you kill the possibility of being corrected. True guidance remains true even if you wish it otherwise. Another trap is the addiction to novelty. Each week a new ritual, a new teacher, a new practice, all because the nervous system has mistaken anxiety for identity. This constant shifting creates the illusion of movement, but underneath nothing stabilizes. A way to break through these distortions is through a structured exercise of depuration. Spend 3 minutes breathing into coherence. Then take 4 minutes to write down the worst plausible scenario for your goal. Not a cinematic catastrophe, but the most realistic difficulty you might face. Then write, in 3 minutes, the minimum that would still count as a gain, even if everything else failed. Finally, choose one action that makes sense in both extremes. The beauty of this action is that it survives polarity. Whether things unfold smoothly or become difficult, this step remains valid. Such actions tend to attract confirmation from the world precisely because they are not fragile. They are rooted in clarity, not fantasy. When practiced, silence begins to reveal gradients. You start to differentiate between excitement that is fragile and calm expansion that is sustainable. The former burns quickly, leaving you restless again. The latter grows steadily, guiding you into consistency. The universe, if one may speak in metaphor, does not reward frantic insistence. It mirrors the states that can be embodied and lived. When you step into silence, you stop demanding miracles and start noticing alignments. After weeks of such practice, a person often finds that the very texture of solitude shifts. Loneliness once felt like abandonment, but in silence it transforms into companionship. The rhythm of breath, the cadence of observation, the subtle convergence of repeated themes, all of these become partners in dialogue. You no longer look for cosmic fireworks. You listen for patterns that whisper through the fabric of daily life, and when you hear them, you act not with desperation, but with the calm assurance that arises from coherence. There comes a moment when the waiting ends, when the signals you have been learning to perceive step forward and demand translation into action. The email arrives unexpectedly, the invitation surfaces, the coincidence repeats once too often to dismiss. At that threshold, many falter. The mistake is to turn the sign into a new excuse, a story that justifies remaining in old habits instead of stepping into new decisions. The question is not whether the universe is speaking, but how you respond when it does. Authentic signals are rarely grandiose. They tend to request small, specific, and verifiable actions within the next 24 to 72 hours. They do not demand that you change your entire life in an instant. Instead, they invite you to move one piece of the board in a way that reshapes the entire game over time. Think of a ripple in water. The first gesture is modest, but the circles expand. If a sign seems to insist on an immediate revolution of everything, it is more likely projection than guidance. To navigate this territory with clarity, one can apply a model of 4 filters. The first is bodily coherence. When you hold the decision in awareness, do you feel calm expansion or unstable euphoria? Genuine alignment tends to expand steadily without shaking. The second filter is ecological impact. Does this step nourish your body, relationships, and work over the next month, or does it corrode one of these areas? The third filter is the ratio of cost to energy. Is the step small enough to fit within your current rhythm, yet significant enough to shift momentum? The fourth filter is independent repetition. Has the theme appeared in at least 2 unrelated contexts without you hunting for it? When these 4 converge, the probability that you are interpreting a genuine sign increases dramatically. To illustrate, imagine the domain of relationships. A person encounters an old acquaintance unexpectedly. The impulse may be to turn this into a story of destiny, to project an entire future onto one encounter. But the filters demand sobriety, bodily coherence. Does the interaction bring quiet openness or anxious excitement? Ecological impact. Does revisiting this connection support or destabilize existing commitments? Cost and energy. Can the next step be as small as a clear conversation rather than an entire reinvention? Independent repetition. Has the theme of reconnection been appearing in other spaces recently? The action that passes through these filters might be as simple as arranging a 20-minute conversation to test alignment. If contraction arises, that too is a signal, a boundary that deserves respect. There are myths that must be dismantled here. One is the romantic notion that if something is meant to be, it will unfold without effort. In reality, absence of panic is not the same as absence of work. Authentic alignment still requires intelligent labor, but labor that does not fracture the body. Another myth insists that any obstacle is proof that the path is not meant for you. Yet obstacles often serve to refine clarity and rhythm, rather than negate destiny. The obstacle becomes a teacher, not a barrier. Maintaining connection in this stage requires discipline. Set aside windows of attention, 2 blocks of 10 to 15 minutes each day where no notifications intrude. In that space, review the signals, observe patterns, and adjust your agenda accordingly. Another practice is writing a letter from the future. Imagine 6 months have passed, and you are returning to describe your life to your present self. Write not in terms of triumph or glory, but in the concrete sensations of daily life. How you sleep, the tone of your conversations, the rhythm of your mornings. This anchors desire in texture rather than fantasy. A third practice is the anonymous act of service. By offering something without expectation of recognition, you break the grip of self-obsession and calibrate perception toward interdependence. It is in the field of shared care that synchronicity often multiplies. A guiding metaphor helps here. Imagine yourself navigating an archipelago of islands. Signs are not the islands themselves. They are the luminous buoys marking safer channels. To reach the island, you must still sail, adjusting to winds, currents, and storms. If you mistake the buoy for the destination, you drift aimlessly. If you ignore it, you risk running aground. But if you treat it as orientation, the path becomes clear, step by step. The 72 hours after receiving a sign can be understood as a cycle. In the first 24 hours, take a minimum action. Send the message, research the opportunity, request feedback. Between 24 and 48 hours, measure the response from the environment. Does clarity increase or does resistance emerge? Between 48 and 72 hours, decide whether to maintain, escalate, or release the step. Document the reason for your choice. Over time, these records become your personal archive of dialogue with life, sharpening discernment. What emerges is an ethic of movement. Signals no longer remain abstract or ornamental. They become triggers for grounded steps. Solitude diminishes because you are no longer drifting without orientation. You are in dialogue with reality, responding with humility and courage to the invitations that appear. Even refusal becomes sacred when done with coherence. Saying no with respect is as aligned as saying yes with calm enthusiasm. Both responses strengthen trust that the universe mirrors your state faithfully. The journey of connection is never about acquiring something external. It is about unveiling what has always been available. The universe has been whispering through repetitions, coincidences, and the texture of your own body, but the static of urgency and doubt made it inaudible. Across these chapters, you have learned that attention filters reality, intention defines direction, and the state you sustain becomes the resonance by which authentic signs reveal themselves. This is not superstition, nor is it blind faith. It is the mechanics of coherence. When the body signals safety, when the mind holds a clear question, and when the heart sustains calm expansion, life arranges itself in meaningful patterns. Napoleon Hill once wrote that organized thought shapes destiny, not because of mystical shortcuts, but because clarity breeds disciplined action. Carl Jung described synchronicity as the meaningful coincidence where inner world and outer events meet. To integrate these perspectives is to recognize that transformation comes not from chasing extraordinary miracles, but from noticing the ordinary moments that carry extraordinary alignment. The repeated theme in a week, the conversation that nudges you, the contraction that signals not here. These are the languages of reality guiding your next step. The conclusion is not that the universe suddenly decides to speak, but that you decide to listen differently. Silence is no longer emptiness. It is the fertile ground where signs grow. Small actions are no longer insignificant. They are the vessels through which alignment takes form. Loneliness dissolves because dialogue replaces absence. You are not abandoned in an indifferent cosmos. You are part of an intricate conversation where every breath, every perception, and every decision contributes to the unfolding of your path. Let this be the enduring reminder. The universe does not hand you certainty. It hands you patterns. And when you answer with coherence, you discover that companionship was never missing. It was woven into every step, waiting for you to walk with presence. Before you leave, pause with this question. If the universe has been whispering to you all along, what sign are you still pretending not to see? That question is not meant to haunt you, but to awaken you. Every coincidence you brushed aside, every repeated theme you labeled as random, every quiet contraction you ignored, they are all invitations to step into clarity. What would happen if just this week you honored one of them? If this message resonated with you, I invite you to join this community of seekers who are choosing coherence over noise. Subscribe to this channel so that you never walk this path alone. Your next step of alignment might be hidden in the very video that appears on your screen now. Continue watching, stay present, and let the conversation with the universe unfold one signal at a time.